This is why the media hating Jaxson Dart is good for Ole Miss this season.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, Rebel Nation. I am your host, Stephen Willis, a 10-year veteran member of the national media and a former Ole Miss staff member. Today's episode covers the surprising snub of Jaxson Dart from the All-SEC teams at the end of SEC Media Days. This oversight counteracts basically 6 months of hype from him. And listen, there are some media people that are very high on him still, but at Media Days, they set Dart up to prove himself in the biggest games in the 2024 playoff run. It provided him and the team the one thing that they did not have before this, and that is a chip on their shoulder going into fall camp. So we will talk about that next. This is the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all the podcast apps and on YouTube. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen every day, and a special hello to the everydayers who make the show what it is. And don't forget to find a second listen on the network. Chris Gordy at Locked On SEC, or even Zach Blackerby at Locked On Auburn provides other perspectives on college football, the SEC, and honestly, Ole Miss. So check it out. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. As the playoffs wind down, the sports stop sporting the way we want them to. But this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right. There's something for everyone every day, all summer long. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So Jaxson Dart did not make any of the All-SEC teams when they were released on Friday. The three quarterbacks that were selected ahead of them was Georgia's Carson Beck, Texas's Quinn Ewers, and then you have Alabama's Jalen Milroe. In my opinion, all three fan bases of those teams would take Jaxson Dart without question to be a quarterback of their team right now. And that's why I think that Jaxson Dart should be the All-SEC quarterback. When you look at what Jaxson Dart was able to do a year ago, his numbers were pretty pretty great. 233 for 358, 3,364 yards, 23 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. The reason the touchdowns weren't up is honestly because they were kind of small on the outside, and Tre Harris was able to get doubled when he didn't. The offense kind of ate when it did. It kind of ran it in. And when having Quinshon Judkins and Ulysses Bentley IV and those guys at running back also drove the touchdown numbers down a little bit. But if you saw him in the Peach Bowl, if anybody saw him in the Peach Bowl against the number one defense in the whole United States of America, you saw that Jaxson Dart has the chance to be special. That was a game where Ole Miss had to get to quick twitch thinking, quick throws, use the weapons you have, get the ball in their hands in a hurry. Jaxson Dart not only put the ball where it needed to be, but elitely put the ball where it needed to be downfield. If you ask Lane Kiffin about it, he talked about that at SEC Media Days, and he just ripped Penn State to shreds. There wasn't a player on that defense that was able to cover what was happening. Even Caden Lee has a chance to be a cheat code for Ole Miss by the end of the year. You can hear me on that one. He has a chance to be an absolute cheat code, but Jaxson Dart made him even a little bit better. And so somebody that hardly played as a true freshman against Penn State was effective because of Jaxson Dart and what he did. His pre-snap read, his RPO reads, all of this stuff was at a next level. Now, when you look at Carson Beck, really good quarterback. Nobody's saying he's bad. Nobody is saying that he doesn't deserve to be up there or whatever. My whole point is Jaxson Dart absolutely deserves to be up there. But Beck is a really good quarterback, but he has the benefit of having the most talented roster in all of college football playing with him. That is inarguable. You look at Quinn Ewers. He lost some skill players and all that, but I don't think Quinn Ewers is better than Jaxson Dart, and Jalen Milroe I don't think is better than Jaxson Dart. He's a really good athlete, but if you saw what happened in the national championship game against Michigan, you saw a quarterback that was unable to function down the field. That person got rated third team All-SEC. So Jaxson Dart got left out. And because he got left out, That has basically eliminated 6 months of rat poison and 6 months of work that everybody has done on Ole Miss of talking about how great they were and this player is going to be good and this player is going to be good and this is the most talented roster that they've had, national title, yada, yada, yada. This team going into SEC Media Days had every single thing that a team needed to make a long run in the playoffs, except one. And that one was a chip on the shoulder. This is Jaxson Dart's team. I've said that many, many times. This is Jaxson Dart's team. He recruited a large number of them. Him coming back to school was a major factor of what was going on. He has basically been anointed as the centerpiece of Ole Miss football, even over Lane Kiffin. This is his team. So a slight or a snub against the identity of the team is going to affect everybody. So what the SEC media have done by leaving him off the list is by making sure that in fall camp and Ole Miss going through there's going to be a chip on their shoulder going through fall camp. That's almost inarguable at this point. The running backs, the wide receivers, the whole 9 yards, Jaxson Dart's going to be ready to go. And I've talked all the time about how Jaxson Dart has answered every single question that has been asked of him the whole time he's been at Ole Miss. Pretty much the last 15 or 16 games at Ole Miss, he has been legitimately good. He has answered those questions, and now the questions get real. Jaxson Dart, let's say that Ole Miss wins 11 or 12 games, goes to the playoff and all of that. This is what that is going to mean. Jaxson Dart is going to leave Ole Miss with about 90 to 95% of the quarterbacking records, running and passing. He is going to have those. He is going to leave Ole Miss as the winningest quarterback in the history of college football at the University of Mississippi, a school that has had 2 Mannings as the quarterback. He will have done that in 3 years, which means that nobody has had more time to get it done. It is the reason, and I actually had some pushback over the weekend about my comparison of Jaxson Dart to Connor Shaw. And everybody's like, Jaxson Dart's going to be a good NFL player. He might. The point is, I hope he does. That would be great. That is not why I'm making that comparison. And you not understanding that and making everything about the NFL is kind of what's wrong with college football, if we're going to be honest. All I care about is what the young man can and will do at Ole Miss. And when I compare him to Connor Shaw, I compare him to a quarterback that won 11 games multiple times at South freaking Carolina. It has nothing to do with NFL potential. It has everything to do with college football ready player, because that's what I care about. And that going into this season is what I care about. I do not care about 2025. I do not care about draft stock. I do not care about the past anything more than 18 months. I could care less. Jaxson Dart has a similar mindset of that. This guy's a winner. He's answered every single question. And the media, by leaving him off the all-SEC teams, which he undoubtedly deserved to be on, is going to affect him in a way that he is going to be, okay, we'll show them. But he is, the media at SEC Media Days, they weren't the primary, the only story in town. Like Brad Crawford from CBS Sports, this is his post-SEC Media Days quarterback rankings, where he ranked Jaxson Dart the number 1 quarterback in all of the SEC. I agree with Brad 120%. And he sees and he knows what I see. Brad Crawford says, various SEC quarterbacks revealed that college football's new helmet communication should be leading to a sizable production this season. And judging by the reaction of Jaxson Dart, the Rebels have a cheat code at the position with Lane Kiffin calling the plays. Few players were as poised as Dart and Dallas, who, like Milroe, who you can tell is anxious to get going in this season and will face a lot of preseason pressure as a top 5 team. Expect Dart to put up the best numbers in the SEC with the vast weaponry and mission to make the playoff. That's a real thing. And that needs to go into what I'm talking about and what I'm saying. Again, not saying that Carson Beck's a bad quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. I'm not saying that Jalen Milroe's not a good quarterback. He's a very good quarterback. I just don't think that either of them are better than Jaxson Dart. And other people believe the same thing, but that's the benefit of having opinions on this subject. It is going to be really interesting to see what Jaxson Dart does with the start of fall camp. And there's other players on Ole Miss's team that think they got snubbed in the All-SEC rankings as well. John Saunders is one of them. Juice Wells, one of them. And I can understand like this, and this is what has everybody very, 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 very afraid. I probably needed to put about 4 more varies in there. But if, say, Jaxson Dart makes All-SEC on this list, and you look down, well, Tre Harris is a first-teamer. Caden Prieskorn's a first-teamer, obviously. Juice Wells went into 2022 or 2023 as the best receiver in the Southeastern Conference. Now, he's on Ole Miss. He's probably an All-SEC level player. You have the number 1 player in all of JUCO that over the weekend, we saw pictures of him studying the playbook in Oxford. That gives them a good sign. And Ulysses Bentley, the running back, made the All-SEC team. You see what I mean? This offense has the chance to be at the very most special level that Ole Miss has ever seen. Coming up next, we will drive into the incredible achievements of the 6 Ole Miss football players who actually did make the All-SEC team. Stay tuned to find out who made the cut and what it means for the Rebels this season. I love sports. I love them so much I never want them to stop. But as the playoffs wind down, we get fewer and fewer games. And the sports just aren't sportsing like we want them to. But FanDuel lets me keep the sports going whenever I want. All I have to do is open up the app and dream up any bets I want to and when I'm in the mood. And this summer, FanDuel is hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Maybe you can use that to bet on the Ole Miss Rebels over-under on wins, which currently sit at 9.5. Or maybe you're interested in Ole Miss being minus 122 to make the college football playoff. That's about 54% probability, by the way. Or maybe Jaxson Dart at plus 1,500 to win the Heisman Trophy. Maybe that is your flavor of choice. You can do all of that. That's right. There's something for everyone every day all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon to start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that screaming and shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24/7 sports streaming channel programmed for you every day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news. Streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And there's still time to join the Grove Collective and help Ole Miss football be elite. You can go to thegrovecollective.com and join today. So it wasn't all doom and gloom with the SEC media predictions, and 6 Ole Miss players actually did make it, and 3 of them actually made first team All SEC, which is tied for the second most in the SEC for offensive and defense. Like Georgia, the Georgia Bulldogs were the number 1 team by far. Like I said, it's the best roster in all of college football. There's no debating that whatsoever. And then Ole Miss is tied with Alabama with 3 players each. Ole Miss got first team players in Caden Prieskorn, Tre Harris, and on the defensive side of the ball with Walter Nolen. You know, Alabama had 3 as well, moved around like that. And second team, you had Jared Ivey, defensive end, who was at SEC Media Days, defensive MVP of the Peach Bowl, really good player. And at third team, you had Princely Umanmielen and Ulysses Bentley IV. Those are the 6 players that made it for Ole Miss. Now, the really interesting part of this to me personally, just me, like I said, Juice Wells belonged on one of these teams. He has the talent to do that. And last year at this time, he did make one of these teams. Caden Prieskorn, first team, I have no trouble with that. If anybody that watched the Peach Bowl a year ago can know exactly what happened. Tre Harris, ditto on that one. Walter Nolen, the transfer from Texas A&M, he is somebody that I expect to make an immediate impact this year. Last year at A&M, 37 tackles, 8.5 tackles for loss, 4 sacks. He wore number 0 at A&M. I think he's going to wear number 2 at Ole Miss. The roster is getting close to coming out, and we're probably somewhere between 7, 8, 9 days between the start of fall camp going and the first game against Furman is a little over a month away at August 31st. Really good player. Now, if you look at Tre Harris, obviously, Tre's a dude, right? Tre is a dude. Last year, 54 catches, 985 yards, 8 touchdowns. He did that in essentially 9 games. He played like a series against Tulane. He played like a series against Alabama, missed the whole Georgia Tech game. He would have ended up at somewhere around 65 to 70 catches, 1,200 yards, and 8 to 12 touchdowns a year ago if he'd have played a full season. Health is going to be important for him. He was rated by PFF as the number 1 player graded in the entire country going against single coverage. The whole purpose of this Ole Miss offense is going to be able to will it be able to take single coverage or double coverage off of Tre Harris? Will Tre Harris see more single coverage because of the Juice Wells, the Deion Smiths, the Jordan Watkins, the Caden Prieskorns, the Ulysses Bentley? Can you make it to where the defense's only hope is deception? And with Prieskorn and Harris first team, that kind of gives you an idea of what is going on there. Now, if you look at the other one is Caden Prieskorn, who had a big game. He was kind of hurt most of the year, if you think about it. But he really came on, caught the game-winning pass against Mississippi State, the Hyde play that I actually called on this podcast, like the Wednesday before, almost ran in the game to perfection for a touchdown. Then he followed that up in the Peach Bowl with 10 catches, 136 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 2-point conversion. I think he was the offensive MVP of that game as well. That was the first team all SEC players. When you look at the second team, you have Jared Ivey, defensive MVP of that same Peach Bowl, really good player. And if you look at this list, Ole Miss has 3 defensive linemen that are appearing on these all SEC teams, some of which at a lower level than we kind of expected. Ulysses Bentley IV, pretty excited about him. I think Ulysses has a chance to be a breakaway guy. I've described him as a plus Jerry and Ely. So we'll see exactly what he did. 540 yards and 4 touchdowns a year ago. And then finally for third team, we have Princely Umanmielen. This player transferred in from Florida, had 39 tackles a year ago, 11.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. He's probably one of the most athletic and best pass rushers in the entire country. PFF has him at a mid-first round level grade. So we'll see what happens with him. Him getting a third team pick with all SEC was at least interesting. Really, really good football players. Now, we talked about how the media snubbed Jaxson Dart and the media snubbed Juice Wells and the media got these players right and all of that. Let me just remind everybody these media days thing. Do not take them overly seriously. They're just like a random poll that you see in all walks of life all the time. There's 1,500 people signing up and getting media credentials. Most of those are from the state of Texas. Most of those have little or no information about Jaxson Dart, about those guys, and they go in and vote. Now, the flip side of that is these same people that are voting are going to they're going to act like they're the most serious things in the world, and they're right and other people are wrong, right? So I know what's going on. They don't know what's going on. I'm right, they're wrong, all of that. Even though it's being put in the same pie, these same people that are going to take themselves way too seriously are the same ones that are very upset about Vanderbilt getting 2 first-place votes. Because preseason polls and preseason teams and all that, it's really fun to talk about, and it's excellent for podcasts like mine. But at the end of the day, they mean nothing really. We're going to find out in the middle of September, middle of October, middle of November, exactly where Ole Miss sits at that point. Is Jaxson Dart the best quarterback in the SEC? Well, by the Georgia game, we will know. As simple as that. But like I said, enjoy these things. Everybody enjoys the conversation with them. Have fun. use them for motivation like Ole Miss is going to do with Jaxson Dart getting snubbed. I guarantee you, Ole Miss is going to go through fall practice with a little bit of a chip on their shoulder, and it was a chip that they didn't have a week ago. And so that'll be at least interesting. Should be pretty fired up about that. So big news for Ole Miss fans over the weekend. Ole Miss received a crystal ball prediction for a top recruit. Find out why this could be a game changer next on Locked On Ole Miss. Locked On has launched the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube, and now it's also available on Amazon Fire TV and the free Fire TV Channels app, part of Locked On Podcast Network. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus the national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today now available on the free Fire TV Channels app. Be part of history. Now, David Johnson from Inside the Rebels put in a crystal ball over the weekend for Shakai Mills-Knight, the running back out of Baylor High School in Chattanooga, Tennessee, or the Baylor School. You have to forgive me. Baylor's kind of like a boarding school type stuff. The Tennessee private system is at least a little bit weird. So bear with me. But this is a good running back. This is a real good running back. I talked to Brian Smith about him the other day, and he gushed on him. He's a guy that said he was favorably able to be compared to Quinshon Judkins with how he plays the position. So, and we all know that Kevin Smith and Lane Kiffin hit a home run whenever they signed Quinshon Judkins. But this is something that you kind of need to know. It's not just a quick crystal ball out of Inside the Rebels and 247. That's just another piece of information that I've heard that has made me get excited about this player. I heard stuff 2 or 3 weeks ago. There was a lot of information that was kind of swirling on him whenever about the time we did our meet and greet. And so that gave me an idea of how I should position my opinion. And this crystal ball just kind of justifies that even a little bit more. We'll see exactly what happens. And by the way, crystal balls, RPMs, and all of that, I like them. They're fun. They're good fodder, again, for shows like mine. But it's kind of funny that a lot of times these are the same people about keeping a kid's moment. If that makes sense. Let the kid have their moment. And they will get on to everybody else that does it. Then they will put in their crystal ball and just like, hey, this is my prediction where this guy's going to go, which is kind of stealing the moment if you think about it. But it is what it is. I do like Shakai Mills-Knight. He's a bigger running back. He is a very skillful guy, and he has a chance to make an impact if he should commit to Ole Miss, which, things seem to be trending that direction whenever you look at him and perhaps LaDarian Clardy and those guys. But he's a bigger physical running back that has a chance to at least be interesting. Now, let's change speeds just a little bit. We're going to get out of here in just a second. Deion Smith he put out an Instagram story over the weekend where he was in Oxford, Mississippi, and he was in Oxford to visit Jaxson Dart. This is not very hard to figure out what's going on, in my opinion. It's not. I think, like I said whenever the stuff came out last week about Deion Smith, that I think he was going to make it. And Shay Hodge, I believe on Inside the Rebels, said that he was taking a couple of junior college classes to try and get his GPA up over a certain threshold or something like that. And whenever that happens, he'll be at Ole Miss. It might be a couple of days after fall camp starts. It might be with fall camp. But like I said, anybody that says they know for sure, they don't. But I am increasingly hopeful that Deion Smith will make it on campus, and him meeting with Jaxson Dart a week before fall camp starts is probably a good sign that all this is going to go down. And Deion Smith is potentially the most talented wide receiver in that whole wide receiver room, and that's with Tre Harris. And everybody knows how I feel about Tre Harris. And if the goal of this season is to take double teams off of Tre Harris, Deion Smith would do that in spades. Whenever you look at Jordan Watkins and Juice Wells and Aiden Williams and Caden Lee, I talked with Brian Smith on Sunday night. It was last night's episode, and he said that he spoke with a college coach and that they were talking about some All-American level player. And the college coach was like, yeah, you're going to see him about 10%, 15% less plays this season, especially early in the season. And Brian's like, what? What are you talking about? Why would you take your best player off voluntarily do that? And then the guy says, we have to prepare for 16 games now. And I've talked about this on my show multiple times. You have to prepare for 16 games. And as Brian said, and that coach said, that if you play them hard early, they're going to get beat down late. If you play them hard in September, all of a sudden, whenever you play Ohio State in the playoffs, you're going to get run 45-0. So it is about not peaking early for Ole Miss as much as it is being consistent all the way through the season. Making it to the playoffs, that's a marathon. But you also need to try and make it to where you're peaking somewhere around November 30, somewhere around the Egg Bowl, Ole Miss should be peaking. And then you get into the playoffs and you just kind of roll the dice and see what happens. But Ole Miss has a real chance to go very far. I like the Shakai Mills night. I like the news that came out about Deion Smith. And Ole Miss is kind of where they need to be at the moment. And I love the fact that they have a chip on their shoulder going into fall camp. Thanks for making Locked On Ole Miss your first listen. We have the most perspective surrounding Ole Miss sports, and it's one of the many reasons why we are the number one Ole Miss podcast. Thank you for your support. But for your second listen, check out Locked On New Venture, the first ever national sports 24/7 streaming channel on YouTube. Locked On Sports Today is here for you 24/7, covering the top sports stories of the day with the local experts of Locked On, plus our national shows that cover every single league. Find Locked On Sports Today, now available in the free Fire TV channels app. And for those of you on YouTube, we will send you there right now. Howdy toddy, everyone.